the South Park treatment. This is absolutely brilliant. Have a look.
Meghan have got the South Park treatment. The episode has just gone to air in the United States. And Harry and Meghan, well, they were treated like the prince and princess.
I'm sick of hearing about them, but I can't get away from them. They're everywhere, in my face.
Let's have a bit of a laugh at Harry and Meghan's expense because I've finally caught up with this South Park episode.
It's quite vicious in a way, but quite funny as well.
You know that moment when someone gets called out so perfectly, so devastatingly, that you actually feel embarrassed for them? Well, grab some popcorn because we just witnessed the most brutal celebrity takedown in television history. And it wasn't delivered by a talk show host, a journalist, or even a rival celebrity. It came from 4 foul-mouthed cartoon kids in Colorado. South Park just did what years of royal scandals, tell-all interviews, and media circus couldn't accomplish.
Don't you see, Butters? Teaching people to think of their brand just makes more people like them. This whole thing is wrong. They're telling you guys to reduce yourself into products.
They turned Harry and Meghan from controversial figures into complete laughingstocks. And honestly, it was long overdue. Picture this. You're sitting in your multi-million-dollar mansion, probably sipping some ethically sourced tea, when suddenly your phone starts buzzing. Not the usual poor sympathy messages you've grown accustomed to, but friends texting you links with crying, laughing emojis. Your publicist is calling. Your agent sounds panicked. And then you see it. There you are, animated in all your contradictory glory, demanding privacy while literally standing on a stage with a megaphone. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife.
I'm sick of hearing about them, but I can't get away from them. They're everywhere, in my face. Look, Kyle, we just kind of don't care about some dumb...
Welcome to your South Park moment, Sussex style. But here's what makes this different from every other celebrity roast in South Park's legendary history. This time, the cartoon version wasn't even an exaggeration. It was just Tuesday afternoon in the life of Harry and Meghan. Let's rewind to how we got here, shall we? The episode opens with what South Park calls the Prince and Princess of Canada. And if you need more than 2 seconds to figure out who they're really talking about, you haven't been paying attention to celebrity news for the past 4 years. These cartoon royals have all the familiar traits: the red hair, the American accent, the designer-victim complex, and most importantly, an absolutely mind-boggling obsession with privacy that they announce to anyone within a 50-mile radius. The fictional couple launches something called the Worldwide Privacy Tour, which is exactly what it sounds like. They jet from city to city with camera crews, lighting technicians, and probably a social media manager.
We want privacy! We want privacy!
All while screaming about how much they hate being watched. It's like watching someone burn down their own house while complaining about the heat. Sound familiar? Because if you followed the real-life Harry and Meghan saga, you've basically been watching this exact story unfold in slow motion for years. The South Park writers didn't have to dig deep for material here. They just had to turn on Netflix, scroll through Spotify, or walk past any magazine stand in the last 2 years. The content practically wrote itself. A couple who fled the royal family to escape media attention, only to sign deals with every major media company in existence. It's like quitting your job because you hate your boss, then immediately becoming your boss's business partner. But here's where South Park's genius really shines.
What the hell?
What did he just say? He victimized me. It's because I'm an ethnic woman.
He can't do that. I'll see. Wait, you're ethnic? This is an outrage. We'll just see how he deals with my blue.
They didn't just mock the obvious contradictions. They captured something deeper, something that's been nagging at people for months but nobody could quite put their finger on. The cartoon Meghan character is portrayed as this relentless personal brand machine, constantly packaging every moment of vulnerability into content opportunities. She's got a book called Living Through Victimhood and treats every conversation like a TED Talk about her own resilience. Meanwhile, cartoon Harry just sort of exists in her orbit, nodding along like a confused golden retriever who's not quite sure how he ended up at this particular dog show. And that's when it hits you. This isn't really satire anymore. This is documentary filmmaking with better animation.
We're just performers instead of human beings.
He's right. Trying to make ourselves into a brand just turned us into products. We don't need to be a brand, do
The real Meghan has turned personal struggles into a multimedia empire. Every podcast episode, every interview, every carefully choreographed public appearance is branded as healing, growth, or empowerment. But when you step back and look at the pattern, it starts feeling less like genuine vulnerability and more like emotional capitalism. Harry, meanwhile, has become the supporting character in his own life story. Remember when he was the fun prince? The one who seemed genuinely happy, serving his country, supporting veterans, connecting with people. Now he mostly appears as a prop in Meghan's various media ventures, occasionally chiming in with pre-approved talking points about his mother or his therapy sessions. The South Park episode captures this dynamic perfectly. The prince character keeps trying to have his own opinions.
Yeah, come on, honey. We don't need this place.
Honey.
But he's constantly being redirected back to the approved narrative. It's uncomfortable to watch because it feels uncomfortably real. But let's talk about what happened after this animated masterpiece hit the airwaves, because that's where this story gets really interesting. Within hours, social media exploded, not with the usual divided camps you see with most celebrity controversies, but with something rare in our polarized world: universal agreement. People from completely different political backgrounds, different countries, different generations, all saying the same thing. Finally, someone said it. The hashtag started trending immediately. Twitter was flooded with clips from the episode. TikTok creators were making reaction videos faster than you could refresh your feed. Even people who had never watched South Park were sharing memes about the privacy tour. But here's what's really telling. The usual defenders stayed quiet. When Harry and Meghan face criticism, there's typically an army of supporters ready to explain why they're misunderstood, why the criticism is unfair, why we should focus on their charitable work instead of their contradictions.
I think it's fair to say they're now an international laughingstock. Your views?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I really enjoyed it. It was South Park at its most biting.
This time, radio silence from most corners. Even their most vocal advocates seem to be taking a long pause. That's the power of effective satire. When it's done right, it doesn't just make people laugh. It makes them recognize something they already knew, but hadn't fully articulated. South Park gave people permission to say what they'd been thinking, that the Emperor's new clothes were looking pretty threadbare. The episode didn't create new criticisms. It just organized existing frustrations into one devastating 22-minute package. And reportedly, the Sussex camp was not amused. According to various entertainment industry sources, Meghan's response was swift and predictably dramatic. The episode was apparently deemed vile and defamatory, which is interesting language choice for what amounts to cartoon characters saying out loud what half the internet discusses daily.
Damn it, now the prince is playing polo on the lawn.
We are here because privacy is a basic human right.
There were whispers about legal consultations, which honestly makes the whole thing even funnier. Imagine trying to sue South Park for accurately portraying your public behavior. It's like trying to copyright your own contradictions. South Park has survived legal threats from Scientology, international governments, and Tom Cruise. The idea that they'd be intimidated by a former royal family member with a Netflix deal is almost adorable, but the real damage wasn't legal. It was cultural. See, when you build your entire public identity around controlling the narrative, satire becomes your kryptonite. You can manage interviews, curate social media, carefully craft press releases, and stage photo opportunities. But you can't control comedy. Comedy doesn't play by your rules. Comedy just holds up a mirror and says, "Look at yourself." And when that mirror reflects back something that makes millions of people laugh, instead of sympathize, you've lost the culture war. The aftermath has been fascinating to watch. Instead of the usual cycle of outrage, defense, and counter-outrage we see with most celebrity controversies, this time the conversation shifted. People stopped debating whether Harry and Meghan were right or wrong and started questioning whether they were relevant at all.
How dare you, sir? My Instagram-loving wife has always wanted her privacy!
That's the kiss of death in celebrity culture. You can be loved or hated, but you cannot be ignored. And South Park didn't just mock Harry and Meghan. It made them seem small, petty, and ultimately unimportant. The episode showed them as people so disconnected from reality that they can't see their own contradictions. Not evil villains worthy of our anger, just self-absorbed celebrities worthy of our laughter. And laughter is so much more damaging than hatred. When people hate you, they're still emotionally invested. When they laugh at you, they've moved on. But let's dig deeper into why this particular roast landed so differently than all the previous criticism. For years, Harry and Meghan have positioned themselves as truth-tellers fighting against an unfair system. Their narrative has been consistent. They're brave outsiders willing to challenge outdated institutions and speak difficult truths, even when it costs them personally. That's a compelling story, and for a while, it worked. People admired their apparent willingness to sacrifice comfort for authenticity. The problem is, the more they talked, the less authentic they seemed.
We're going to play this. You'll be able to see it on Talk TV and hear it on Talk. Just enjoy it. 9:45, a moment of hilarity on Talk.
Every interview became more polished. Every public appearance more calculated. Every statement more carefully crafted to hit specific emotional and political notes. They went from seeming spontaneous and genuine to seeming like they had focus grouped every word. And then came the business deals. The Netflix documentaries, the Spotify podcasts, the book deals, the speaking engagements. Suddenly, their truth-telling started looking a lot like truth-selling. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing inherently wrong with celebrities monetizing their stories. But when your brand is built on rejecting celebrity culture, while simultaneously embracing every aspect of celebrity culture, people start to notice the disconnect, South Park noticed. And more importantly, they helped everyone else notice too. The cartoon couple in the episode aren't evil or malicious. They're just completely lacking in self-awareness. They genuinely seem to believe that announcing their desire for privacy on television makes sense. They appear confused when people point out the contradiction between their words and actions. And that confusion, that complete lack of self-reflection, is what makes them perfect comedy targets.
How many more princes and his wives have to live in this nightmare?
The real Harry and Meghan have shown similar patterns. They seem genuinely surprised when people question their motives. They appear hurt when their contradictions are pointed out. They act as if their good intentions should shield them from criticism of their actual behavior. But good intentions don't erase contradictions. And in the age of social media, contradictions spread faster than good intentions. The South Park episode crystallized something that had been building for months. People were getting tired of being told how to feel about Harry and Meghan. They were exhausted by the constant drama, the endless explanations, the perpetual victimhood tour disguised as activism. And when people get tired of your drama, they start looking for the entertainment value instead. They stop taking you seriously and start taking screenshots. That's exactly what happened here. The episode gave people permission to laugh instead of empathize. And once people start laughing at your contradictions instead of excusing them, it's very hard to get their sympathy back. Now let's talk about the ripple effects, because this wasn't just a moment of internet entertainment. This was a cultural shift. In the days following the episode, something interesting happened in the broader media landscape.
If it's truly what we want, then we really can get away from it all. No more magazines and Netflix shows. We really can live a normal life. Yes, I'm sure you agree, darling.
Journalists started asking different questions. Instead of the usual, "How are you handling the pressure?" type interviews, reporters began asking more pointed questions about specific contradictions. Why use royal titles if you've rejected the royal system? Why sue publications for privacy violations while simultaneously releasing documentaries about your private life? Why criticize media attention while courting media attention? These aren't new questions, but they started being asked with less deference and more directness. South Park had essentially given the media permission to stop treating Harry and Meghan's contradictions as complex nuances that required delicate handling. The late-night comedy circuit jumped on board immediately. Hosts who had previously handled the Sussex saga with kid gloves suddenly felt free to make jokes. The South Park episode had proven that mocking Harry and Meghan wasn't off-limits anymore. Even their Hollywood social circle seemed to shift. The enthusiastic social media support that used to follow every Sussex appearance or statement became noticeably quieter. It's one thing to support friends who are facing unfair criticism.
Hey! You ever heard of a thing called privacy?
Yeah, nobody gives a shit. Will you two just shut up and go away?
It's another thing entirely to defend friends who have become widely recognized punchlines. Celebrity culture is ultimately about social currency, and being associated with widely mocked figures decreases your own value in that ecosystem. It's not personal, it's business. The most telling sign of this cultural shift was how other comedians and content creators started referencing the South Park episode. Usually, when South Park roasts someone, it's treated as an isolated incident. This time, the episode became a cultural touchstone that other creators built upon. Suddenly, every awkward Harry and Meghan moment was being viewed through the South Park lens. Every new interview was scrutinized for privacy tour moments. Every press release was analyzed for unintentional comedy. They had become memes. And in internet culture, becoming a meme is often more permanent than becoming a scandal. But here's what makes this situation particularly interesting from a media studies perspective. Harry and Meghan aren't the first celebrities to be mocked by South Park, but they might be the first to be so thoroughly defined by that mockery. When South Park went after Tom Cruise or Kanye West, those celebrities had other cultural identities to fall back on. Cruise is still seen as an action star. Kanye is still recognized as a musical genius, regardless of his personal controversies. Harry and Meghan, however, had built their post-royal identity almost entirely around their narrative of being misunderstood truth-tellers. When that narrative became a joke, they didn't have much else left in the public consciousness. Their charitable work, while real, hasn't captured public attention the way their media appearances have. Their business ventures are mostly known for their connections to their personal drama rather than their independent merit. So when South Park effectively demolished their carefully constructed public image, there wasn't a separate professional identity for people to consider. They had put all their eggs in the narrative basket, and South Park cracked that basket wide open. The episode also highlighted something that many people had been thinking but hadn't quite verbalized.
Why are we so mad today? Because we want our privacy.
Harry and Meghan seemed to be trying to have it both ways on everything. They wanted the respect that comes with royal status without the responsibilities. They wanted the freedom of private citizens without giving up the privileges of public figures. They wanted to tell their story without being questioned about inconsistencies in that story. Most importantly, they wanted to be taken seriously as cultural leaders, while behaving in ways that made them look like ambitious celebrities with good marketing teams. South Park simply pointed out that you can't have it both ways forever. Eventually, people notice the contradictions. And when people notice contradictions in your carefully crafted public image, they start questioning everything else about that image. The charitable work becomes suspect. The activism starts looking performative. The vulnerability begins feeling calculated. That's the domino effect that South Park triggered. They didn't just mock Harry and Meghan's specific contradictions. They made people question the entire Sussex brand. Now let's address the elephant in the room, the aftermath.
Down with the monarchy! We deserve our privacy!
These people.
In the weeks following the episode, Harry and Meghan's team went into full damage control mode. There were carefully timed positive stories placed in friendly publications, social media posts highlighting their charitable work, strategic appearances at high-profile events. But here's the thing about trying to recover from being a meme. The harder you try, the funnier it becomes. Every earnest attempt to restore their serious public image just reminded people of the South Park episode. Every carefully crafted statement about their important work got flooded with comments referencing the privacy tour. It's like trying to convince people you're not clumsy right after you've tripped and fallen in front of everyone. The more seriously you take yourself, the more people remember why they were laughing in the first place. And that's where Harry and Meghan find themselves now, trapped in a comedy feedback loop where every attempt to be taken seriously generates more material for people who see them as entertainment rather than inspiration. The South Park episode didn't create this dynamic, but it certainly accelerated it. It gave people a framework for understanding Harry and Meghan's public behavior that was more compelling than the framework Harry and Meghan were offering themselves.
Park County Police Station, what's your emergency?
Yeah, the neighbors across the street are setting off fireworks and it's 10:30 at night.
Oh, is it the Prince of Canada and his wife who just want to be left alone?
Instead of seeing brave truth-tellers fighting an unfair system, people started seeing two celebrities who couldn't decide whether they wanted to be famous or private, so they chose both and expected everyone to pretend that made sense. And once people see you that way, it's incredibly difficult to change their minds. Every future action gets filtered through that lens. Every statement gets analyzed for new contradictions. Every public appearance gets scrutinized for unintentional comedy. You become living proof that South Park was right about you. But here's what's really interesting about this whole situation. It didn't have to happen this way. If Harry and Meghan had actually stepped back from public life after leaving the royal family, South Park would have had no material to work with. If they had focused on their charitable work without constantly discussing their personal drama, they would have maintained their dignity. If they had chosen either privacy or publicity, and stuck with that choice, they would have avoided the contradictions that made them such perfect targets for satire. But they couldn't help themselves. They wanted to control how their story was told, and that desire for control led them to tell it over and over again in slightly different ways, until the inconsistencies became impossible to ignore. South Park just connected the dots that were already there. So where does this leave Harry and Meghan now? In the short term, they'll probably try to wait it out. They'll hope that some new celebrity scandal will capture public attention and give them space to rebuild their image. They'll continue their charitable work and hope that eventually, people will focus on that instead of their media contradictions. But in the age of internet culture, things don't really go away anymore. The South Park episode will always be there, ready to be referenced whenever Harry and Meghan try to take themselves too seriously again. They've become permanent residents of the comedy internet, whether they like it or not. In the long term, they'll need to make a choice. They can continue trying to manage their public narrative, knowing that every attempt will be viewed through the South Park lens. Or they can actually step back from public attention and let their actions speak louder than their media appearances. But based on everything we've seen so far, the second option seems unlikely. They've become addicted to the spotlight, even when that spotlight is illuminating their contradictions. And as long as they keep feeding the comedy machine with new material, people will keep laughing. South Park didn't just roast Harry and Meghan. They created a template for understanding celebrity contradictions that will outlast any individual controversy. They showed how modern celebrity culture allows people to build entire brands around being misunderstood, while simultaneously courting the attention they claim to reject. That template will apply to future celebrities who try to have it both ways. Harry and Meghan just happened to be the perfect example at the perfect moment. They wanted to be cultural icons. Mission accomplished, just not in the way they intended. Now they're cultural cautionary tales, animated and forever preserved in South Park history as the couple who demanded privacy while touring the world to talk about how much they wanted privacy. And honestly, that might be the most lasting impact they ever have on popular culture. Sometimes, the mirror that comedy holds up shows us exactly what we needed to see, even when we didn't want to look. In this case, it showed us two people who had lost themselves so completely in their own narrative that they couldn't see how absurd they had become. The tragedy isn't that they were mocked. The tragedy is that the mockery was so accurate. And that's how you go from royalty to cartoon characters in 22 minutes of animated television. Not through malice or unfairness, but through the simple act of someone pointing out what everyone was already thinking. Sometimes the truth really is stranger than fiction. And sometimes, fiction just helps us see the truth more clearly. In Harry and Meghan's case, South Park provided that clarity in the most public way possible. Whether they learn from it or continue to provide material for future episodes remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, they'll never be able to demand privacy with a straight face again, and maybe that's exactly what they needed to hear.